Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dress shoes on wet grass. My name is James Walker. I am 38 years old, and on that gray morning I stood under a low sky in Cleveland, Ohio, watching my father-in-law's casket sink slowly into the ground. My wife, Nicole, squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt, mascara clinging to the corners of her eyes even though she had barely cried. Around us, nearly 200 people clustered beneath umbrellas and black coats. Business associates, longtime employees, family, church friends, all of them dressed in somber colors. All of them looking toward the polished mahogany box that held what was left of Robert King. Robert had built King Industrial Systems from nothing. 30 years earlier, he had started in a rented garage behind a strip mall on the east side of the city. He was the kind of person who believed in long hours, fair pay, and firm expectations. Over 3 decades, he turned that tiny fabrication shop into a $40 million manufacturing operation that supplied automotive parts, construction components, and custom industrial equipment all over the Midwest. People respected him because he was demanding, but never petty. He learned the names of spouses and kids, showed up at hospital beds, and slipped grocery gift cards to employees who were having a rough month. It was impossible to work there and not feel that the place was an extension of him. He treated me like the son he never had. 7 years earlier, after Nicole and I married, he brought me into King Industrial Systems as a production manager. I had worked in other plants before, but nothing like his. Robert took an interest in me immediately, not because I had married his daughter, but because I cared about throughput, safety, and people in equal measure. Every Tuesday, he and I had lunch in the small executive dining room off the main floor. We would sit with sandwiches and coffee, talking about bottlenecks on Line 3, vendor reliability, union negotiations, or why certain supervisors discourage feedback instead of using it. He would ask my opinion and really listen to the answer. Sometimes he would challenge me. Sometimes he would nod slowly, eyes narrowing like he was testing more than my ideas. Nicole also worked at the company, but her world was very different from mine. She handled client relations and corporate sales, and she was good at it. She could host a room full of skeptical executives from Detroit and have them laughing in 20 minutes. She knew how to close a deal, how to charm a hesitant buyer, how to tell a story that made a standard product sound like a custom solution. But she never cared about operations, manufacturing schedules, supply chain management, refining the maintenance plan. Those conversations bored her. If Robert and I talked about production uptime at dinner, she would roll her eyes and steer the discussion back to vacation plans or luxury cars. The funeral ended with a brief prayer, the pastor's words dissolving into the cold air. People drifted away in small clusters, speaking in low voices. Some of the older employees came to me, gripping my hand, telling me that Robert had spoken highly of my work. Nicole's cousins hugged her and murmured that she would carry on her father's legacy. I stood there with my hand in hers, listening to shovelfuls of wet dirt fall onto the casket, feeling a tight ache in my chest that had nothing to do with grief alone. Robert was gone. The person who had taught me how the whole machine worked, who had quietly prepared me for more responsibility, was no longer here to explain what came next. The days after the burial blurred together. There were casseroles left on our porch, flowers delivered to the house, sympathy cards lining the kitchen counter. Nicole spent hours on the phone with her mother, with the estate attorney, with board members who had been with the company since the early days. I went into the office twice to help with transition paperwork and to sign forms related to a life insurance policy that Robert had set up for his daughter years earlier. The building felt wrong without him. His laugh did not echo down the hallway, and his office door stayed closed, the blinds drawn. Employees moved quietly, speaking in hushed tones. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something. The email arrived 4 days after the funeral. It was mid-morning, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a mug of coffee that had gone cold. My phone buzzed. The subject line on the message made my stomach twist. Meeting required. The sender's address was new, nicole.king@kingindustrialsystems.com. Beneath that, the content was clipped and formal. Please report to the executive office at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Bring your building access card and company laptop. There was no greeting, no closing, no affection. It could have been sent to any employee. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. Then I told myself I was being paranoid. Nicole had been appointed chief executive officer by the board the day before. I knew that because she had come home, eyes shining, and announced it while standing in our kitchen, her voice a mix of pride and relief. I had hugged her and said that Robert would be proud. Part of me had believed that. Another part had seen the quick flicker of triumph in her eyes, the way her shoulders squared as if she had just stepped onto a stage she had been rehearsing for her whole life. Even so, I assumed the meeting was about restructuring or new responsibilities, not anything sinister. I arrived at the office at 1:55 in the afternoon, dressed in my usual navy suit, carrying my laptop bag and access card. The receptionist nodded at me, a little unsure, as if someone had warned her I might appear. Nicole's new assistant, a young man in a fitted suit I had never seen before, asked me to take a seat in the reception area outside the executive hallway. "She will be ready for you shortly," he said, already turning back to his computer screen. 20 minutes passed. The assistant typed and clicked, occasionally glancing at the door to Nicole's office. Employees walked by, whispering to each other, casting quick looks at me before moving on. The silence in that hallway felt manufactured, intentional, like a stage direction everyone had agreed to follow. Finally, the assistant stood and opened the office door. "She can see you now," he said. Nicole sat behind Robert's large oak desk, and for an instant, the sight of her there knocked the breath from my lungs. She had already changed the room. The heavy burgundy curtains were gone, replaced by sleek gray panels. The framed photograph of Robert and his first employee, taken on the factory floor in the early years, was missing from the wall. In its place hung an abstract painting with sharp angles and clashing colors. A new glass sculpture sat on the credenza, catching the light. Nicole wore a fitted black dress and a string of pearls, her hair pulled into a smooth bun. She did not look up when I stepped inside. "Have a seat," Nicole said, eyes still on her laptop screen. Her tone was cool, almost bored, as if she were speaking to a vendor, not her husband. I sat down across from her, placing my laptop on my knees and my access card on the edge of the desk. She typed for another few seconds, then closed the computer and finally met my gaze. There was no warmth in her eyes, no trace of the woman who used to curl against me on the couch and laugh at late-night television shows. She looked at me like I was a problem she had been waiting to solve. "I am restructuring the management team," Nicole said. "Your position is being eliminated. This is effective immediately." The words landed like a physical blow. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I had spent 7 years in that building, working late, solving crises, holding production together when equipment failed or suppliers were late. Robert had trusted me with decisions that affected hundreds of employees. "What?" I said quietly. "You will receive 2 weeks of severance pay," Nicole continued. "That is more than generous, considering your performance issues." She slid a folder across the desk as she spoke. Her fingers did not touch mine. The folder contained a termination letter and some generic language about restructuring, redundancies, and strategic realignment. There was nothing concrete, no complaints, no warnings, nothing I could argue against. "Performance issues?" I asked, my voice tightening. "What are you talking about?" Nicole leaned back in the chair that had been her father's, crossing her arms. "James, this is not personal," she said. "The company needs fresh leadership in operations. You have been adequate but limited. You do not take initiative. You keep things running, but you do not drive innovation." My father understood that. He and I talked about this many times. It felt like watching a stranger speak with my wife's face. "Your father had lunch with me every Tuesday for years," I said. "He never mentioned any of that." "Those lunches were about day-to-day details," Nicole said, dismissing it with a wave of her hand. "He discussed strategy with me. Vision, expansion, big-picture growth. You were there to execute. That is all." She tapped a pen on the desk, once, twice. "Sign the document. Security will escort you out." I stared at the paper in front of me, at the uncompromising lines of her signature already printed beneath the company letterhead. It was as if she had waited for the funeral to be over, and then moved me off the board like I was nothing more than a piece in her way. "I am not signing this," I said. My voice was steady now, even though my heart hammered in my chest. Nicole's eyes narrowed slightly. Then she pressed a button on her desk phone. "Security, Please come to the executive office, she said. 30 seconds later, 2 security guards stepped into the room. They did not look surprised. They had been waiting in the hallway for the call. One of them, a broad-shouldered man I recognized from the night shift, cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, please collect your belongings and vacate the premises," he said. I stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in that building, seen and unseen, turned toward me. I picked up my laptop and access card, slipping both into my bag. Nicole had already opened her computer again. She did not look up, did not say goodbye, did not show even a flicker of regret. The guards escorted me down the hallway, past the open doors of offices where people pretended not to stare. We walked to my office on the 2nd floor, and they watched silently as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, framed photos, a coffee mug, a stack of books that Robert had recommended on leadership and process improvement. 7 years of my life went into that box in less than 15 minutes. As I walked past the main production floor with the guards at my side, I could feel the workers watching from the corners of their eyes. Some looked confused. Others looked ashamed, as if they should say something and did not know what. No one spoke. The guards walked me all the way to my car and stood there while I loaded the box into the trunk. They waited until I drove off the lot before turning back toward the building. I drove home in silence. The familiar streets of our neighborhood in Cleveland blurred past the windshield. Houses I knew by heart. Brick bungalows, 2-story colonials, tidy lawns, felt distant, like a town I had once visited instead of the place where I lived. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat there for a long minute, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the tick of the cooling engine. My wife, the woman I had shared a bed and a life with, had just fired me from the company her father built, treating me like a liability she needed to erase quickly. Then I remembered something. 2 years earlier, Robert had called me into his office on a rainy afternoon. He had closed the door, locked it, and walked over to the file cabinet in the corner. From the bottom drawer, he had taken out a large manila envelope and placed it in my hands. "Put this somewhere safe," he had said, his voice quieter than usual. "Do not open it unless something happens to me, or unless you need protection. You will know when the time comes." I had asked him what was inside. He had smiled, that small, knowing smile of his. "Insurance for both of us," he had said. At the time, I thought he meant an emergency contact list or some additional life insurance documents. I had gone home that evening and put the envelope in the bottom drawer of my own filing cabinet in the home office, sliding it behind old tax returns and in used warranties. I had not thought about it again until that moment in the driveway. Sitting there with my employment terminated and my marriage dangling by a thread, I could finally see clearly. I carried the box from the trunk into the house, set it down in the hallway, and walked straight to my office at the back. My hand shook just a little as I opened the cabinet drawer. The envelope was exactly where I had left it, thick and heavy, Robert's blocky handwriting on the front. For James Walker. "Open when necessary." I sat down at my desk and held it for a moment, thumb resting on the sealed flap. A part of me wanted to rip it open immediately. Another part hesitated. Whatever waited inside this envelope would not be trivial. Once I looked, I could not unlearn it. It would change things. I thought about our Tuesday lunches, about the way Robert had sometimes gone quiet when we discussed succession planning. 6 months before he died, he had said something that stuck with me. "You need protection and guarantees in this world," he had told me, staring out the window at the plant below. "You cannot rely on loyalty alone, not even inside a family." At the time, I thought he was speaking generally. Now, those words rang in my head like a bell. I took a steady breath and tore the envelope open. 3 things slid out onto the desk. A stack of legal documents held together with binder clips, a small universal serial bus drive, and a handwritten letter on Robert's personal stationery. I picked up the letter first. The ink had a slight smudge at one corner, as if he had paused and pressed the pen harder than usual. "James," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I'm either gone or things have gone sideways. Perhaps both. I need you to understand what I have done and why I did it." I read slowly, my eyes scanning every line. Robert wrote about the day I married Nicole, about how he had seen potential in me, not just as a husband, but as a leader. He said I reminded him of himself when he was younger, hungry, serious, deeply concerned with building something that would last rather than chasing quick wins. He described Nicole with a mixture of love and blunt honesty. She was brilliant at sales, charismatic, able to close any deal, but she did not care about operations. She wanted results immediately, money now, status now. He wrote that he loved her intensely, but did not trust her with his legacy. So I created a fail-safe, Robert wrote. A silent partnership structure that gives you controlling interest in King Industrial Systems. You own 65% of the company through a private holding company called Walker Strategic Holdings. It is completely legal, fully documented, and verified by the best corporate attorneys I could afford. The board does not know. Nicole does not know. The structure activates on my death or upon your request to formalize it. You can reveal your ownership at any time. My vision blurred for a moment. I set the letter down and pressed my fingers to my forehead. The legal documents confirmed everything. There were partnership agreements, corporate filings, share certificates, transfer documents. All were signed, notarized, and dated over the past 5 years. The paper trail showed how Robert had funded Walker Strategic Holdings initially, then gradually transferred majority shares to me through transactions disguised as consulting fees and performance bonuses. It had been done carefully enough to look routine, but clearly enough to be indisputable if anyone ever examined it with an attorney's eye. The universal serial bus drive contained digital copies of the entire structure and encrypted financial records. I sat there for several minutes, surrounded by proof that the company I had just been fired from was, in reality, mine. It felt unreal, like I had stepped sideways into a different version of my life. Then my phone buzzed with a new text message from Nicole. "You need to vacate the house by the end of the week," she wrote. "It is company property." I stared at the screen. The house was not company property. I had inherited it from my mother 3 years earlier when she passed away. Nicole knew that. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a test to see if I would fold. I did not respond to Nicole's message. Instead, I picked up Robert's letter again and looked at the name he had written for his attorney near the bottom. "If you ever need to activate the structure, contact attorney Martin Hale," he had written. A downtown phone number followed. I dialed it. On the second ring, a calm voice answered. "This is Martin Hale." I introduced myself and said that Robert King had told me to call him if anything ever happened. There was a brief pause on the line. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I have been expecting your call. I am very sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man." "You knew he died?" I asked. "Yes," Hale said. "I have been monitoring the situation around the company. Robert left specific instructions, and part of those instructions involved waiting to hear from you. When are you available to meet?" "Today," I said. "Now." He did not hesitate. "Come to my office downtown," he said. "I will clear my schedule." I gathered the documents, the universal serial bus drive, and Robert's letter, slipped them into a briefcase I had barely used, and left the house. Hale's office was in a modest but well-kept building 2 blocks from the courthouse in downtown Cleveland. It was not the towering glass structure of a massive law firm, but a smaller space with polished wood floors and framed degrees lining the hallway. The receptionist greeted me by name and ushered me into a conference room. Hale walked in a minute later. He was around 60 years old, with close-cropped gray hair, an expensive navy suit, and sharp eyes behind thin glasses. He shook my hand firmly and gestured for me to sit. "How much do you know about your ownership position?" Hale asked, folding his hands on the table. I placed the legal documents and the letter on the polished wood surface. "Just what is in there?" I said. "I need you to tell me if this is legitimate or if I am losing my mind." Hale smiled slightly, a professional smile that did not reach his eyes. He read the letter first, then scanned the legal documents with the easy familiarity of someone who had drafted them. "It is absolutely legitimate," he said after a few minutes. "I structured it personally 5 years ago. Robert was very specific about his concerns. He wanted to protect both the company and you. So, I actually own 65% of King Industrial Systems through Walker Strategic Holdings." I asked. Saying the words out loud felt strange. "Yes," Hale said. "You are the sole owner and operator of Walker Strategic Holdings, which makes you the majority shareholder of King Industrial Systems. You have complete control. You can call emergency board meetings, remove executives, and make operational decisions. Robert designed it that way so that, if necessary, you could step in and safeguard his life's work. Why did he not simply put this in his will?" I asked. Hale leaned back slightly. "Wills are public documents," he said. "They can be challenged. Family members can contest them on emotional grounds, claim diminished capacity, or drag things through probate court for years. Robert wanted something that would stand on its own, separate from family disputes. By establishing your ownership years ago through legitimate business transactions, he created a structure that is extremely difficult to attack. It does not depend on his deathbed statements. It depends on corporate law and paper trails. Nicole does not know about any of this, I said. Hale shook his head. No, he said. Robert insisted that the arrangement remain confidential unless and until you chose to activate it. Has something happened that makes you want to formalize your position? I told him everything about the cold email, the meeting in the redecorated office, the termination letter, the guards waiting in the hallway, the text about the house being company property. Hale listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a leather notebook. When I finished, he closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. She is making a serious mistake, he said, a catastrophic one from a corporate governance perspective. She believes she holds all the power because the board appointed her as chief executive officer, and because she assumes the company will rally around her. But she does not actually have the power she thinks she has. You do. The only question is how you want to use it. I looked at the documents spread out in front of me, at Robert's careful planning laid bare on the table. What are my options? I asked. You can reveal your ownership immediately, Hale said. Call an emergency board meeting, present the documentation, and assume control. You could remove Nicole as chief executive officer today. Or you can wait, watch what she does, document everything, and make your move when it will be most persuasive. Robert rarely acted impulsively. He preferred to let people show who they really were before he stepped in. You have the same choice now. I thought of Robert again, of how he had watched quietly when people were tested. He believed that stress stripped away the layers people use to hide their true selves. I want to wait, I said slowly. At least a few days. I want to see what she does with the power she thinks she has. I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind about why she should not lead this company. Hale nodded. That is a prudent approach, he said. I recommend we schedule an emergency board meeting for next Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. That will give us time to prepare everything and will give her enough rope to expose her judgment. As majority shareholder, you can call the meeting whenever you wish. We agreed on next Monday. Hale promised to draft formal notices for the board and to send them out at the end of the week. As I left his office, the air outside felt colder but clearer. For hours earlier, I had been an unemployed former manager with a box of personal belongings in my trunk. Now I knew that I owned the company that had turned its back on me. It was an unsettling feeling, like standing at the edge of a high rooftop, aware of both the danger and the view. Over the next week, I watched from a distance as Nicole began to shape King Industrial Systems in her own image. People I trusted started reaching out to me, confused and upset. On Tuesday evening, I received a call from Tanya Brooks, an accountant who had worked for Robert for more than a decade. James, what in the world happened? Tanya asked, skipping any greeting. No one understands why you are gone. We asked Nicole, and she said it was performance-related. That is ridiculous. Everyone knows you kept that plant running. She can say whatever she wants for now. I replied. What else is she doing? Tanya hesitated. I could almost hear her weighing how much to share. She fired 3 department heads yesterday, Tanya said finally. Good people. People who survived the recession, who kept things together when orders dropped. She brought in her own people to replace them. None of them knew our systems. And she hired some consultant named Elliot Price. He follows her around taking notes and driving a brand new sports car. He has not spoken to anyone in accounting or on the floor. They have private meetings in her office, and then she announces another bold change. I thanked Tanya and asked her to keep copies of any paperwork related to terminations, new hires, and unusual expenditures. Document everything, I told her. Keep duplicates of anything that looks off. If she asks why you're printing copies, tell her the auditors like hard files. Tanya was quiet for a moment. Are you planning something? She asked. I am planning to protect Robert's legacy, I said. For now, just keep your head down and keep records. On Wednesday afternoon, I received a text message from Warren Ellis, one of the most competent supervisors on the production floor. She is spending money like it does not mean anything, he wrote. I called him immediately. What is going on? I asked. Warren sounded tired. She had the entire executive floor ripped up, he said. New furniture, new carpet, some fancy art pieces. They say the renovation budget is close to $200,000. It looks like a luxury hotel lobby up there now. And I heard she put a luxury sport utility vehicle on the company lease for herself. Meanwhile, we're still fighting with outdated machines on line 4. The next day, Melissa Green from Human Resources called me, her voice tight and raw. "James, I do not know how much more of this I can take," she said. "She is making me process terminations for people who have been here 15 years, 20 years. Loyal workers. They're being replaced by people with half the experience at half the pay. It tells everyone that loyalty does not matter anymore." I felt my jaw clench. "Melissa, I know this is hard," I said. "I need you to keep doing your job and to keep copies of every termination notice and every new contract. File one set where they belong and keep a second set somewhere only you can access. If anyone asks, say you're preparing for a routine audit. You are really planning something, are you not?" Melissa asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "But for now, I need you safe. Robert trusted you. I trust you. Just keep the paper trail clean." She took a shaky breath. "This is not what he would have wanted," she said. "I know," I replied. "That is why we're going to fix it." On Friday afternoon, Nicole came to the house. She did not knock. She used her key and walked in as if nothing had changed. I was sitting in the living room with Robert's documents spread out on the coffee table, highlighter in one hand. Nicole stopped short when she saw the papers, but her expression tightened rather than softened. "You are still here," she said, irritation edging her words. "I live here," I replied. "Not anymore. I told you to leave." She crossed the room and stood over me, arms folded. "This house belonged to my mother," I said, looking up at Nicole. "She left it to me in her will. It has nothing to do with your family or the company. You know that." Nicole's lips curled into a faint smirk. "You do understand that everything you have is because of my father, right?" Nicole said. "This marriage, that job, this life, none of it would exist without him. You should be grateful instead of stubborn." The contempt in her voice stung more than her words. "Interesting perspective," I said. She pulled a set of papers from her bag and dropped them onto the coffee table, right next to Robert's letter. "These are separation documents," Nicole said. "Sign them. Move out. We can make this easy, or I can make your life very difficult. I have lawyers. I have resources. You have nothing." "I cannot help it," I smiled. It was a small, involuntary reaction to the sharp contrast between what she believed and what I knew. "What is so funny?" Nicole demanded. "I was just thinking about something your father told me once," I said. "He said, never underestimate people, especially when you think you have all the power." Nicole's eyes flashed. "Do not patronize me," she said. "I am the chief executive officer now. I am in charge, and you are nothing." She stepped closer, leaning down until her face was inches from mine. "If you're still here on Monday, I am changing the locks," she said. "You cannot legally change the locks on a house you do not own," I replied. "That is against the law." Nicole straightened. "Watch me," she said. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I listened to the sharp squeal of her tires as she backed out of the driveway and sped away. Then I picked up my phone and texted Hale. "She just threatened to change the locks on my house. Can we move the board meeting up?" He called within minutes. "What happened?" Hale asked. I described the confrontation, the threats, the separation papers. "Monday still works best," Hale said after a pause. "It gives us the weekend to finalize our presentation and gives her more time to make damaging decisions." "Has she done anything particularly egregious, yet beyond the firings and the spending?" "Not that I know of," I said. "Then let us wait," he replied. "The more reckless her behavior, the easier it will be for the board to see why she should not be leading the company." I did not have to wait long. On Saturday morning, I received a call from Ryan Phillips, one of the supervisors in the automotive parts division. "James, you need to know something," he said without preamble. "She is meeting with executives from Summit Industries. They're talking about buying our entire automotive parts division." I sat up straight. "That division brings in 40% of our revenue," I said. "I know," Ryan said. "I was setting up the conference room for their meeting yesterday. They were talking before they realized I was there. I heard something about a significant personal fee for Nicole if the deal goes through. Once they saw me, they stopped talking. A cold weight settled in my stomach. A finder's fee, Personal compensation for selling off nearly half of the company's revenue stream to another corporation. Thank you, Ryan, I said. Do not mention this to anyone else. Not yet. After he hung up, I called Hale again. She's trying to sell the automotive division, I said, and she's apparently expecting to receive a personal payment if the sale goes through. Hale's tone sharpened. She cannot sell off that division without board approval, he said, and as majority shareholder, you can veto any sale even if the board agrees. It would be wise to let her present this idea at the board meeting. That way, everyone can see exactly where her priorities lie before we intervene. Sunday evening, Nicole sent one more text. Last chance, she wrote. Leave tonight or face the consequences. I stared at the message for a moment, then set my phone face down on the table and went back to reviewing Robert's documents. I did not respond. By that point, my anger had cooled into something harder and more focused. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about protecting a company and its people from the woman who believed she was entitled to dismantle both for her own benefit. On Monday morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock, showered, and put on my best charcoal suit, the same suit Robert had once complimented, telling me that I looked like a chief executive officer. I knotted my tie carefully, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw someone I barely recognized. Not because I looked different, but because I understood my role differently. I was no longer a middle manager, hoping for promotion. I was the person Robert had quietly chosen to guard his legacy. I arrived at the company parking lot at 8:30. Hale was already there, standing beside his car with two other attorneys from his firm, both carrying slim briefcases. Ready, he asked. Yes, I said. My voice sounded calm. Together we walked through the main entrance. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. Mr. Walker, you are not supposed to be here, she whispered. I am here for a board meeting, I said, continuing past her desk. She hesitated, then said nothing more. We took the elevator to the third-floor conference room. The board members were already beginning to arrive, 6 men and women who had worked with Robert for decades. Some had gray hair and tired eyes. Others were middle-aged and polished. They greeted me with cautious nods, clearly surprised to see me at the table. No one asked why I was there. Hale distributed a folder to each board member, but instructed them not to open it yet. Nicole walked in at 8:55, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She wore a tailored blue suit and an expression of barely controlled authority. When she saw me sitting at the conference table, her steps faltered for half a second. Then she recovered. What are you doing here? Nicole demanded. I did not answer immediately. Instead, Hale stood. Miss King, he said politely. My name is Martin Hale. I represent James Walker. He has every right to be here. In fact, he is the one who called this emergency board meeting. Nicole let out a short, incredulous laugh. He cannot call board meetings, she said. He is not even employed here anymore. Hale's expression did not change. Actually, as majority shareholder, he can call board meetings whenever he wishes, Hale said. The room went very still. Every board member turned to look at me, then back at Nicole. Color rose in her cheeks. This is absurd, she snapped. Someone needs to call security. Miss King, please sit down, said Leon Porter, the oldest board member and Robert's first business partner. His voice was calm but firm. Let us hear what this is about. Nicole glared at me, then reluctantly took a seat at the far end of the table. Hale opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder of documents. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, addressing the board, what you are about to review is the documentation of James Walker's ownership position in King Industrial Systems. Through Walker Strategic Holdings, he owns 65% of the company, making him the majority shareholder. Hale passed the documents around the table. The board members began to read, flipping pages, examining signatures and dates. Nicole grabbed her copy and skimmed it quickly. This is fake, she said. Some kind of fraud. My father would never give controlling interest to him. Never. Leon looked up from the documents. These signatures are authentic, he said quietly. I recognize Robert's handwriting. These corporate filings are dated and stamped properly. This appears legitimate. It is not possible, Nicole insisted, her voice rising. I'm the chief executive officer. The board appointed me. I spoke for the first time. The board appointed you as interim chief executive officer, I said, because they did not know about my ownership. Now they do. Nicole turned to the other board members, desperation creeping into her eyes. "You cannot be serious," she said. "You are going to let him steal the company out from under me." "No one is stealing anything," Hale said. "Mr. Walker is simply formalizing a legal position that Robert King created and documented extensively 5 years ago. Your father was very deliberate. He left nothing to chance." One of the board members, an attorney named Kimberly Ross, spoke up for the first time. "I have reviewed these documents," she said, holding up the folder. "The structure is sound. The ownership is valid. Mr. Walker does indeed hold majority control through the holding company. There is no obvious path for challenging this without exposing the company to serious risk." Nicole slammed her palms onto the table. "This is a setup," she said. "A con. You are all falling for it. My father would have told me if he was planning something like this." Leon's gaze softened a little, but his voice remained steady. "Your father and I discussed succession planning many times," he said. "He had concerns about impulsive decisions and protecting the company's culture. He did not tell me the exact structure he was putting in place, but I am not surprised that he found a way to ensure stability." "So what now?" Nicole demanded. "You just hand everything to him? Just like that?" I looked at her across the table. "No one is handing me anything," I said. "I already own it. Your father made sure of that years ago. I learned about it only after you fired me, and I opened the envelope he left for me." Kimberly frowned slightly. "What envelope?" she asked. I reached into my own folder and pulled out Robert's handwritten letter, the original copy, and slid it toward Leon. "He left instructions," I said. "He told me when to open it and why he did what he did." Leon read the letter slowly. His shoulders sagged a little as he reached the end. He nodded, then passed it to Kimberly, who read it with pursed lips. She passed it to the others. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked relieved. Nicole snatched the letter when it reached her, eyes racing over the familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled. "He did not trust me," she whispered. "His own daughter." Leon shook his head. "He loved you," Leon said softly. "He knew your strengths and your weaknesses, just as he knew mine. This is not about love. It is about what he believed was best for the company and its people." "This is not fair," Nicole said, her voice breaking. "Fair is not the standard here," I said. "Legal structures are, and this structure is completely legal." Hale cleared his throat gently. "Given this new information," he said, "I believe we should also address decisions that have been made in the past week. Mr. Walker has provided documentation of concerning activities. He produced another set of documents and handed them out, an itemized list of terminations, renovation expenditures, vehicle leases, consulting contracts, and early-stage negotiations with Summit Industries." The board members read through the list. Their expressions shifted from confusion to anger. Leon looked at Nicole. "You were planning to sell the automotive division?" he asked. Nicole lifted her chin. "Summit Industries made a strong offer," she said. "We could have used that capital for expansion into other areas." "What areas?" I asked. She did not answer. Kimberly spoke instead. "There's a note here about a finder's fee," Kimberly said. "A personal payment to you, if the sale went through." "How much?" Nicole hesitated for a moment too long. $2 million, she said finally. The conference room erupted into overlapping voices. Some board members cursed under their breath. Others demanded clarification. Leon raised his hand for silence. "You are going to receive $2 million personally for selling off 40% of our revenue base?" he asked. "It is standard practice for executives to be compensated for major deals," Nicole said defensively. "Not when they do not own the company," I said. "And you never did. That finder's fee would have been paid using money generated by assets I own, for a sale I did not approve, to benefit you personally at the expense of the company's future." Nicole opened her mouth and then closed it again. No argument came. Hale let the silence stretch for several seconds. Then he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, given these circumstances, it is appropriate for Mr. Walker, as majority shareholder, to address executive leadership," he said. "He has the authority to make personnel decisions at the highest level, including the removal of the current chief executive officer." Nicole's head snapped toward me. "You cannot do this," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "James, wait. We can talk about this privately." I stood slowly. The room quieted. I looked directly at Nicole. "2 weeks ago," I said, "you fired me without warning. You called me into your office, handed me a termination letter, and had security walk me out like a criminal. You told me it was a business decision and that it was not personal. You said I had performance issues and that you were restructuring. Nicole shook her head. James, that was different, she said. No, I said. It was not. I took a breath. Now I am restructuring, I said. Effective immediately, you are removed as Chief Executive Officer of King Industrial Systems. You will receive 2 weeks of severance pay. That is more than generous, considering your performance issues. Nicole stared at me, mouth slightly open. The board members watched in stunned silence. I reached down and pressed the intercom button on the conference table. Security, I said. Please come to the boardroom. Nicole's composure cracked. James, please, she said. We can fix this. We can renegotiate roles. We can. There is nothing to fix, I said. This is a business decision. Nothing personal. Her own words hung in the air between us. The door opened, and the same 2 security guards who had escorted me out the week before stepped into the room. They seemed to understand what was happening without being told. Miss King, one of them said quietly, please come with us. Nicole looked around the table, eyes shining. Somebody say something, she said. This is insane. You are going to let him do this to me. Leon sighed. Your father made his choice years ago, he said. We have to respect it. He trusted James with the company. We can see now that he had reasons. Nicole grabbed her purse with shaky hands and stood up. She stared at me with pure hatred. You will regret this, she said. No, I replied. I will not. The guards led her out of the room. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. For a moment, the conference room was silent. Then Leon exhaled. Robert knew exactly what he was doing, he said quietly. He did, I agreed. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. We went through Nicole's recent decisions one by one. The board unanimously agreed to reverse the terminations of the 3 department heads she had fired. We canceled the expensive renovation contracts that had not yet been fully paid and returned the luxury sport utility vehicle to the dealership. We terminated the consulting contract with Elliott Price, noting that no measurable value had been demonstrated. We formally rejected any proposal to sell the automotive division. Leon recommended that I appoint an interim chief operating officer to support me while I transitioned fully into the chief executive officer role. You understand operations better than anyone here, Leon said. But the administrative side will eat your time alive if you do not have help. Choose someone who knows the culture and the people. I thought of Melissa in human resources, of the way she had fought to preserve fairness, even while Nicole used her department as a weapon. I recommended her for the role. The board approved the appointment unanimously. When I called Melissa later that afternoon and offered her the position of chief operating officer, she went quiet for several seconds. Then she said yes with a shaky laugh of relief. By noon, the transition was official and fully documented. I was the chief executive officer of King Industrial Systems. After the meeting, I walked down the hall to Robert's old office. The abstract painting Nicole had installed was already gone. In its place, someone, Melissa, as it turned out later, had rehung the original photograph of Robert and his first employee standing on the factory floor in their early days, both of them young and determined. I thought you would want that back, Melissa said from the doorway, holding a folder. I cannot stand seeing this wall without it. Thank you, I said. Did you know about the ownership? Melissa asked. Not until she fired me, I said. Robert left me an envelope. He told me to open it if I ever needed protection. I finally understood what he meant. Melissa nodded slowly. He was a smart man, she said. The smartest I have ever worked for. She set the folder on my desk. These are the revised organizational charts and the reinstatement letters for the department heads, she said. They all said they would come back if he called. They were angry, but they still care about this place. Over the next week, I worked longer hours than I ever had before. I met with every department head, then with line supervisors and team leads. I stood in the break room during shift changes and answered questions directly. I told people the truth. Robert had left me controlling interest in the company, and I was taking over as chief executive officer to protect what he built. I assured them that we were not selling off core divisions or replacing loyal workers with cheap labor. The sense of relief in the building was palpable. The tight, brittle energy that had settled over the plant during Nicole's brief rule began to dissolve. People started smiling again. Meanwhile, Nicole tried to fight back through attorneys. She called, texted, and emailed, but I did not respond directly. Hale handled all communication. Nicole wanted to negotiate. She claimed she was entitled to a share of the company because we were married. She demanded compensation for being removed as chief executive officer. Hale met with her lawyers and calmly produced the prenuptial agreement Robert had insisted upon before our wedding. It contained very specific language stating that any business ownership related to King Industrial Systems would remain entirely separate from marital assets. Nicole's attorneys tried to argue around it, but the more they pushed, the more evidence Hale revealed. Her attempt to sell the automotive division for personal gain, her extravagant spending, her pattern of firing experienced staff to replace them with cheaper options. Eventually, her lawyers advised her to accept Hale's settlement offer, $50,000, and a promise not to pursue public litigation that would expose her mismanagement. She rejected it at first, threatened to take everything to court, to drag the company and me through months of headlines and hearings. Hale was not impressed. He explained, in calm detail, how discovery would work, how her emails would be subpoenaed, how meeting notes would become public, how former employees would testify about terminations and fear. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply outlined the consequences. Within a week, Nicole signed the agreement. 3 days after that, the divorce papers arrived at my house. I signed them without reading every line. I did not care about the furniture or the art or any of the other things that had once represented our shared life. I cared about the company, the people who worked there, and the promise I had made to a man who was no longer alive to enforce it. 2 weeks after the board meeting, I was working late in Robert's office, going through his old files. He had kept meticulous notes about vendor relationships, expansion possibilities, and internal promotions he had considered but postponed. As I was scanning a file about potential warehouse space in another part of Ohio, there was a knock on the door. Leon stepped inside, carrying a slim folder. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course," I said. He sat down across from me and looked around the office with a thoughtful expression. "It feels right seeing you in this chair," he said. "Strange for me sometimes. I still half expect Robert to walk in and bark at me for using a stapler. He would probably complain that we are misusing his coffee mug," I said. Leon chuckled. The humor faded quickly, replaced by something more serious. "He would be proud of the way you handled all of this," Leon said. "You did not rush. You did not throw your weight around. You let the facts speak for themselves." I shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done," I said. Leon nodded slowly. "There is something you should know about Robert's planning," Leon said. "A piece he did not put in the letter." "All right," I said. 3 years ago, he came to me and asked my opinion about promoting you to president," Leon said. "He was considering grooming you openly to take over eventually. He admired your judgment. He said you had the rare ability to care about both numbers and people. But when Nicole found out what he was thinking, she confronted him. It turned into a terrible fight. She accused him of choosing you over her, of loving you more. She threatened to cut him out of her life if he publicly put you above her in the company." I sat back, absorbing the information. "He never told me that," I said. "He backed away from the promotion," Leon continued. "Not because he changed his mind about you, but because he did not want an open war with his daughter. He hated family conflict, but he did not stop planning. He just started working quietly, legally, in a way she could not attack, even if she tried. What you saw in that envelope was the result of that planning." "You knew about the silent partnership?" I asked. "I knew he had put something in place to protect you and the company," Leon said. "He told me that much about 6 months before he died. He asked me to support you if anything happened to him. He did not show me the documents. He said that was between you, him, and his attorney. When the board meeting started and Hale handed us those folders, that was the first time I saw the exact structure, but it matched what Robert had told me in spirit." "Why did you not say anything when Nicole became chief executive officer?" I asked. Leon sighed. "Because Robert's instructions were clear," Leon said. "Let events unfold naturally. Do not interfere unless his chosen successor was directly threatened. When Nicole fired you, that was a trigger. I knew it was only a matter of time before you opened that envelope." I shook my head slowly. "He thought of everything," I said. "That was Robert," Leon replied. "Always 3 steps ahead. He knew his daughter well. He He knew that if she got too much power too quickly, she would overreach. He was counting on it, not to hurt her, but to prove to the people around her that she was not ready to lead. It is a cold way to think, I said quietly. Leon shrugged. It is practical, he said. He loved her deeply, but he loved this company too. He loved the people who depended on it for their mortgages and their kids' tuition. He was not going to let anyone destroy that, not even family. Leon stood and extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Mr. Chief Executive Officer, he said formally. I shook his hand. Thank you for standing by me, I said. Do not thank me, Leon replied. Thank Robert. He set all of this up. I just followed his playbook. Months passed. King Industrial Systems stabilized and then began to thrive again. We reinstated quality improvement programs that had been paused. We invested in updating the oldest equipment on the production floor instead of redecorating executive offices. We renegotiated a few vendor contracts and won terms that reduced our costs without cutting wages. Employee satisfaction surveys, conducted anonymously, came back with the highest scores in company history. People said they felt heard again. They said they believed that leadership cared about more than numbers. On a Friday afternoon, 3 months after the board meeting, I stood in Robert's office with a stack of quarterly reports in my hands. The photo of Robert and his first employee watched me from the wall. The plant hummed steadily below the windows, the synchronized movement of people and machines forming a rhythm I had come to know and love. Melissa knocked on the open door. You wanted the quarterly reports? She asked. Yes, I said. She handed me a folder. Revenue is up 12%, she said. Profit margins have improved across the board. We are ahead of projections in every division. What about automotive? I asked. Performing better than ever, Melissa said. We secured 3 new contracts that Nicole was not even pursuing because she was too busy chasing Summit Industries. It is a good thing we did not sell that division. I smiled. That would have been a mistake, I said. Melissa nodded. The best thing we did was bring back the people who actually know how things work, she said. It has not been easy, but it feels like the company again. After Melissa left, I walked to the window and looked down at the production floor. Workers moved with purpose between machines. Supervisors checked gauges and clipboards. Forklifts glided along marked paths, carrying pallets of finished parts. The sight filled me with a quiet, steady pride. Robert's name was on the front of the building, but his real legacy was down there, in the men and women whose lives were intertwined with this place. My email pinged. I turned back to my desk and opened my laptop. There was a message from Leon announcing his retirement from aboard. He thanked me for honoring Robert's legacy and recommended a younger operations expert from another Midwestern firm to take his seat. I replied with gratitude and told him that the door would always be open if he wanted to visit. Another email waited from the attorney handling the final divorce paperwork. Everything is complete, the message read. The divorce is finalized. There are no remaining financial ties. I stared at the words for a moment, feeling neither triumph nor grief, just a sense of something ending so that something else could continue. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. You won, the message read. Congratulations. I hope you're happy with yourself. It was from Nicole, using a new phone. I looked at the text, then deleted it without replying. I blocked the number. There was nothing left to say between us. The past could not be undone, and I refused to let it distract me from the responsibility in front of me. I closed my laptop and walked to the wall, standing in front of the photograph of Robert and his first employee. I am keeping my promise, I said quietly. I am protecting what you built. I am taking care of the people. I am maintaining the standards. In my mind, I could almost hear his rough laugh, the one he used when he approved of something but refused to say so directly. Around me, the office hummed softly with the sound of the heating system and distant machinery. I sat back down at the desk, my desk now, and pulled out the strategic planning documents for the next quarter. There were contracts to review, training programs to expand, apprenticeship partnerships with local technical schools to finalize. The automotive division needed additional investment to keep up with demand. 2 other departments were showing early signs of bottlenecks that would require careful attention. It was a lot. It was exactly what I wanted. I picked up my pen and began writing notes for Monday's executive meeting, outlining priorities and questions for the leadership team. The future of King Industrial Systems was no longer uncertain. It was not in the hands of someone chasing personal glory or quick money. It rested with people who had learned from Robert, who understood the value of building slowly and solidly. The company was stable, growing, and more focused than it had been in years. Outside, the late afternoon light faded over the roofs and smokestacks of the industrial district. Inside, the lamp on my desk cast a steady circle of brightness over the reports and plans in front of me. I leaned over the pages and kept writing, knowing that this work, detailed, demanding, and often invisible, was the true measure of leadership. Robert had seen something in me 7 years earlier, a capacity for responsibility that I had not fully seen in myself. He had been right. The company was secure, and I was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.